Hey, everybody, and welcome back to X's for Podcast. I'm your host, Nico, and you guys can find me at Nico Action on Twitter and Instagram. That's NicoAction. And with me today, I've got some amazing people.
Hi, I'm Rod. You can find me at Rod, the on Twitter and Instagram.
Hey, I'm Nathan. You can find me on Dazzler AOA at Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Blake. You can find me at BTMorgan85 on Twitter and Instagram.
Hi, I'm Tori. You can find me at Tori_Sheehan on Twitter and SM Tori on Instagram, but it's pretty private. You won't find me.
So that means I have today with me 3 co-hosts and a ghost, and that sounds like perfect for what we're going to cover today. So what we're all here to cover today in the handy dandy prop bag is probably one of the most magical X-Men stories ever. Well, magical is probably the wrong word. I know I kind of... Magical Race Wars is not what we're here to talk about.
No.
But we're here to talk about one of the most beloved X-Men stories ever. We're here to talk about God Loves Man Kill. We're here to talk about God Loves Reflections Kill. Wow.
Yeah.
So this is the recently released Treasury Edition, and the cover is so shiny. Oh my gosh. Wow, check that out.
It's so big too. Oh my god.
Huge.
It is really big.
I love these Treasury Editions. Honestly, Marvel gets me to buy way too many books with these.
Yeah.
It's such an easy trick to get me to like want to put it on my shelf. It's got like this nice binding and a nice hard press, and it kind of makes up for the fact that there's no way to put this in an omnibus. We joke all the time that Days of Future Past is 2 issues long, but man, do they love to call trades Days of Future Past. So it's always fascinating to see what they pad it with. You can't pad this. What do you pad this with? A sensitivity pamphlet about racial interaction? Like, I mean, what do you pad this with?
Not the sequel, please.
Less said about that for Mr. Claremont's sake, the better.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to start things off with, this is probably one of my most cherished X-Men stories because it actually highlights the magic of what X-Men could do in terms of celebrating and pointing to diversity and inclusivity. And those are 2 really important things, especially in Chris Claremont's 20-year narrative on X-Men. So my question then for you guys becomes, what was your relationship with God Loves Man Kills before this reading assignment, if you had one?
Well, I did not have a relationship with it. I've always heard of the story. I've looked up references to it, but this is the first time I've read it in a whole. And obviously, I've seen the Kitty Pryde incident and everything else leading up to it. But I've never read it in full until right now, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. Honestly, like sometimes when I read past stories, I'm not always enjoying them, but this one I feel like it still holds up to today for the most part.
Now, Tori, I know that one of your specialties with comics is specifically you've read an incredible wealth of Marvel 60s comics compared to the average modern reader. You're a completionist and a canonist, and you like to go back to the beginning. So you've read 80s comics before. How did this hold up? Was it your first time reading it? And what were your thoughts in terms of the handling of the material?
So this was my first time reading it. I was expecting it was interesting because I use Nico as Nicopedia a lot, and so for me, I was very excited to see Magneto working with the X-Men. I was like, oh great, this is a return to form, and he's like, no, this is the first time that's happened. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, who's this Ariel chick? Was there another phaser? And he was like, no, that was a thing. It's not real. It's not real. And so this was a lot of things that I thought I knew about X-Men. So it's obviously very pivotal to the X-Men mythos, but this was the first time for a lot of things in them. And so it was exciting to get to see something happen in a graphic novel format as opposed to the issues format where it can feel like you're just pushing until a big cliffhanger, until a finale. So
you might have pushing plot rope forever, and it drags on. Now, Blake, this was your first time too, so it's like the 3 of you were like God Loves Man Kills first time reactions club, right?
Yeah, I've heard about it for a while. I just recently started going back through X-Men stuff once like House of X and Powers of 10 and all that started happening, and I've been really into it. But yeah, this was first time for me, and I didn't really know what to expect other than you hear it talked about a lot, and the title was already familiar. So yeah, going through it, it was it was very intense, and I'm excited for the discussion we're gonna have because it's got a lot of hot topics. It's still oddly pertinent. What, almost over 50 years later, right at 50 years almost.
Yeah, like I think we're actually at 40 on it. We're at 40. I appreciate you trying to make me so old. I appreciate it. Right there with you. Thanks. But now, speaking of old men who have read this a number of times, like myself.
Oh, wow.
Thanks, Nico.
Same club, buddy. We're old Weapon X buddies together. It's fine. So now this was not your first time reading it, but I believe this was your first time reading the extended edition.
It was, yeah. No, I hadn't read the extended edition before, and to be honest, I hadn't actually reread God Loves Man Kills for probably a decade. And probably the biggest takeaway from the whole thing is that this is so much more. There's so much more truth to today than it was maybe 10 years ago, it seems like. So I'm like, wow.
Now, I can't help but agree. I actually think this aged, I think in some ways this aged extremely poorly, and I think in other ways this thing aged beautifully.
Yeah.
Now, to talk a little bit about the book itself, 1982 saw Marvel graphic novel number 5 come out. Now, Marvel graphic novel number 1 had been The Death of Captain Marvel, which really set the Marvel mythos in a perpetual state of motion it's never stopped from. Now, there were several other graphic novels till we got to number 4, which introduced us to our precious New Mutants. Man, we love them. And then this came out. Right, the X-Men just came back from the Brood, and they just came back from space, and here they are, and they are faced with something they've never been faced with before, and that's social injustice. I mean, because don't get me wrong, the X-Men are always about injustice, but this was the first time somebody was like, no, we got some like societal problems. We're not just blowing up Cape Canaveral. And Chris Claremont himself actually, I don't know if you guys can tell, but on the cover, it's credited to by Christopher Claremont and Brent Eric Anderson, and they both did that on purpose because they felt that what they had created in this work was so unique and so important that they felt that it took their full names to be credited. They were like, no, this is different. I don't want this associated with the work I do under my regular name. I want this to be special forever. And that, you know, gets me right in the Claremont hole, right? Because my heart a long time ago was just replaced with Claremont books. And Claremont was once asked by Tom DeFalco, and you guys can find it in Comic Creators on X-Men. Now, I will be honest, this is super duper out of print, and it took contributor Josh and I like a week of searching together, scouring the internet to find a copy. So his copy eventually came, I think, but he got like a green cover. I can't even tell you how jealous I am. But so he was asked by DeFalco, God Loves Man Kills was your first and only X-Men graphic novel. Why didn't you do others? And he said, it said everything I wanted to say or should say about the X-Men for someone who's never read the book. I mean, the idea was to tell it all, to encapsulate the X-Men in one book. I think we succeeded with God Loves Man Kills, and I never really wanted to do a sequel. That book says everything I ever wanted to say. We set out to tell the story outside of continuity, so it was vaguely within the time frame of the X-Men at that point in time, but also apart from it. The thought that Stryker showing up in 5 other books as a stock villain made my head explode.
Well,
we wanted to be as valid in 2006 as it was when it first appeared, and I think we succeeded. Oh, I can't even, my little Claremont spot, right? But I do think there is a timeless nature to this book, and to its credit, the book was republished in June of 2020, part 1, and then the other half, the balance of it, because this was split in two at an interesting point, was released in October of 2020. I believe it would have been released a little bit sooner, but for some COVID concerns, right? Now, before we get into the meat of this, I did want to point out that this is one of 3 major returns Claremont is making to the pages of these eras, right? He's doing this. There's the Days of Future Past story and the Wolverine story, both contained in the Claremont collection released by Marvel Made. So he has done 3 major returns to like his prime Claremont era. Like, you know, if this was like, this is the Kobe beef of Claremont stories, right? So it feels good to be back here. It feels nice. Now, I can't wait to jump in with this. And I need to start things off with the extended edition framing sequence. Pages 1 through 5 of the redone version, the extended edition, contains a story between Kate Pryde and a young girl named Kate, who I later came to find out was from X-Men Black Magneto, something I had not known. So I went back and I read X-Men Black Magneto while Tori was like, so who is this girl? And I'm like, I don't know. I think she was made up for this. Let me Google it. And I Googled it and I was like, well, shit, I missed this. And so I went back and I read it really quickly. And I'm not sure why he was allowed to reference that, but it's fine. It's fine. My main complaint here is that this sort of, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the Golden Girls, but there was an episode in which they put on a play that is the worst version of Our Town I have ever seen. And the actor opens it up with, "My story is not a pretty story, but it's one that needs to be told." That is this. It's Kate Pride hyper-personalizing a story that has nothing to fucking do with her in a lot of ways. Now, my question for you guys is, did you feel that this framing sequence added 40 years later created a new context for the story? And how did you feel about this framing sequence creating a new start point when the original start point is so powerful?
I didn't think it was a good idea.
No. No. I mean, it was cute to re-see Kate, but like, and it's always good to see Lockheed, but that's about it.
Yeah, I would say it was cute, but especially since they referenced X-Men Black, and I did read X-Men Black when it first came out, and I loved it. The fact that they didn't have Magneto just come back and talk to her and just have the intro instead of just referencing Magneto, I feel like took away from it. Like,
now, that was something that Tori had actually said to me. She was like, does Kate just go around talking to people for people all the time? And I was like, actually, funny story. Kate is every old man's ambassador.
It's true. It's true.
So now, Tori, how did you feel about the fact that this transformation of the story did make it past the Bechdel test?
It did. I guess sure. You know what? Sure. It did. But that doesn't mean that it was a good idea. It doesn't bring me to anything. I'm shocked that it's referencing a one-off as opposed to referencing all the other things that are happening in the X-Men. To me, if you're going to put out the extended cut of something that is so pivotal to the X-Men, this huge graphic novel that should be slapped on everyone's like first to read list when you come to X-Men, it should be a gateway to what you're doing right now.
I agree.
And it's not.
It kind of feels to me like this might have been a holdover, editorially speaking. Like somebody said, let's work on this. Let's get this out during the X-Men Disassembled era, the Age of X-Man era. And perhaps Mr. Anderson, while an incredibly talented penciler still to this day, had maybe a little bit more trouble with the deadlines than maybe was originally intended. And then the X books wound up with that very specific pattern of there were 12 books in 12 weeks. And then there was the rollout of, and I don't know if everybody remembers this, but when X-Men relaunched with the Dawn of X, in order, the first 4 books were X-Men Marauders, Excalibur, New Mutants, which meant that the first 4 books of the Dawn of X spelled X-Men. X-M-E-N. So like they were trying to do really
I don't ever miss anything, man.
Right? They were trying to do something so specific. So I really agree with you, Tori. Now, my frustration is because it takes us away from that tragedy, that breathtaking tragedy moment of the children dead in the park. And Anderson's pencils are dark and murky in a beautifully powerful way, like a Diodato or a Malieve. They express a sadness through their heaviness. And, you know, if you're a Buffy fan, you might remember the episode Gingerbread, which is one of the most pivotal episodes of Buffy ever, which opens up with a sequence that literally matches this shot for shot. I don't know why the fuck Ian McKellen didn't come in and say that he's part of Moo. So I was very eager to hear how you guys felt. Now, Rod, I know you're like, you know, Buffy #1. So how did you feel about this story ultimately influencing Buffy Summers, Scott Summers? That's literally on purpose. Joss has said it. How do you feel about the reference of God Loves Man Kills in Gingerbread?
I mean, I love it. I love that episode. It definitely brings on a lot of points of society and how people overreact in certain situations or underreact in different things. And I was actually really shocked by this scene in the book because, like you said in the beginning, when we get Kate talking to the girl and everything, I wasn't expecting children being shot and then hung up. I was like, oh, this is not what I expected. I mean, the title does say "Man Kills," so it was very literal. But I appreciate that a lot of pop culture has taken from the X-Men You know, that comics has influenced pop culture to this level. It's great.
And it's not just where, like, you see, you know, Heroes had a character who had nuclear powers, whose radiation made his family sick. And, you know, that's actually like a loving tribute in many ways. It's not like a ripoff. It's a tribute to Squadron Supreme, which did a similar thing with a character named Nuke. So, like, you know, there's traces of that connectivity, but it's amazing to see it places that aren't literal translations, like, you know, just directly across the board. How did you guys feel about this powerful iconography? Did it conjure images of Buffy for anyone else, or was it just sort of like, oh, this is new to me, Dead Children in Park?
As always, having read it for at least a decade, right? Sorry, hold on. I would say that just the open on it was really powerful, and it really brought Magneto in the way that made sense. It was really powerful at the time.
And I love that it has to be that it makes sense, because when you're talking about a societal cancer, a virus of rage, of hate, you need to be examining it from an understanding of the villain needs to be ideological. Bringing in Magneto creates an ideological villain. Now, he might not have been the world's most ideological villain at this time. Interestingly enough, Tori, you had said that even earlier in this video, you didn't know that Magneto hadn't been a good guy yet. So this was a really great time for them to remind us that bad guys have ideological standpoints, and that's where we get Stryker. Now, at one point, he was a stand-in for all evangelical and later televangelical preachers. You know, he is Tammy Faye without the makeup. But
true.
I kind of feel like, you know, it used to be that he was a stand-in for evangelicals, but now he's a stand-in for our politicians. Tori, how does it feel seeing the bad guy of the X-Men be, like Nathan points out, I mean, he's just Mike Pence.
Yeah.
He is everything. There's a lot about this, about Stryker, about the group at the Madison Square Garden that feels very different in a post BLM protests, post Capitol insurrectionist world. Yeah. It's just it hits differently, and to see 1982's version of a mob where people are like, get him, and then someone's like, oh wait, I think he has a good point, and you're like, oh, that's not how mobs work anymore.
No, not at all.
So it was really interesting, but I've always, because I come to the X-Men from kind of more of a movie standpoint, I've always understood that, like, the politicians are not the X-Men's friends. They're the other side of I don't want to say like final boss, but they're the ones they're always trying to get at. And there just happens to be other things in the way that are more immediately dangerous.
Sentinels.
Yeah.
Avengers.
Whatever.
So I love that take on it, that there's always like another something in the way, because I've made this comparison a number of times with things where the setup versus the execution, right? When we start Harry Potter as a journey, we think that Harry's going to have to face down Draco at some point, but that's not really logical. It's that Harry has to face Voldemort. Dumbledore cannot continue to face Voldemort for Harry. At some point, they have to extract that piece, and it has to elevate the kids to the adult level of the fight. And I bring that up because what follows that Stryker introduction is one of the most powerful yet egregious scenes in the history of X-Men for my, like, you know, I have furrow brow. And when we see Kitty Pryde get into a fight, you know, we see this sort of kid version of what's going to happen. We see the versus Draco version here of what is ultimately going to be the versus Voldemort, the versus Stryker down the line.
Yeah.
I understand it was a different time before I was born. And so I can't pass judgment. I'm just dancing because I don't know what else to say. As a kid, I used to just be like, Stevie, curb stomp her. Stevie, tell her she's wrong. And Rod, I really think it's more important that we hear this from somebody who is a man of color and lives a life where this is a reality every single day. How does this scene where Kitty uses an unforgivable racial slur, and unfortunately not for the only time?
No.
Oh no.
No, yeah, I've heard of the times that she's used it multiple times. I never actually. This is my first time reading it instead of actually just like looking at the panel, reading it in like sequence. And yeah, no, she's wrong. And it's I'm not as forgiving. I'm like I will judge. I will judge. It was further back, and I coming back from a non-judgmental standpoint, I can see the point they were trying to make, but having a young white woman tell an older black woman that, you know, she doesn't understand, you know, like injustice, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think so, Kitty. I don't, Ariel. I don't, like, I don't. Maybe you should go back to the sea because I don't know. Like,
right, splashing around. You have no business telling us what to do.
Right, and I don't like the fact that they just chalk it up to, oh well, you know, she's young and cute and innocent, you know, she doesn't know any better, which, you know, might be true, but educate her, like, and don't have the black woman be like, oh well, you know what, she is right. And like, I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Is there more? There's not more to this. This ends there.
How?
Yeah.
Now, so my question then would be, in like a bigger picture, for the sake of the evolution of this story, right? If you take a look in the bonus material, which Tori pointed out wonderfully, they referenced the X-Men Black story in the bonus material for fans who weren't sure where this additional Kate character came from. You can find it there. And Blake, you had said to me about the wealth of bonus material, and I was really excited to read it for that reason. And during my brief perusal of the bonus material, Chris Claremont defends this usage, but is in support of striking it out. I almost said like blacking it out, and I decided that was not the phraseology for this. So how do you guys feel as other people reading it? Like, I mean, I don't want it there. It
was uncomfortable.
No. Yeah, very uncomfortable.
And like Rod said, it not only is it massively uncomfortable, but then like a couple panels later, the she's right, and it was like, no, she's not, and it's so yeah, that I liked so much of this, but that part, and it comes so early. You're like, oh no, like I was like, Nico, what are you making me read? What?
You know, when I ask people to watch Twin Peaks for me, and they get to the scene where everybody's barking in the prison cells, everybody's like, what are you making me watch? And like, I feel better making them watch that than making them read those panels, right? It makes my skin squick. But the fact that he even says that later on in the book, it was important to change the language for the Latino characters, and there were changes made to the language for the extended edition for the fight Kitty finds herself in on the street in the second half. I find myself a little unsure of the ground that Marvel is trying to take with their censorship, and I think better than redacting the word would have been to rewrite the panel.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, it should have been rewritten. I mean, Chris Claremont is an older white man. He's gonna believe he's gonna defend his work. First of all, he's gonna defend his work that is a classic because he wrote so much X-Men and all that. So he's gonna be protective of that. And it's still technically a white man's world, even though it's slowly not becoming that as much anymore. So it makes sense what they did. I don't agree with it, and I think it, like you said, should be rewritten. But I'm not dumb, and I'm not like I know why it was like that. I know why it was just blacked out. I know why it wasn't rewritten, because they wanted it to be like, oh well, we didn't really want to change Chris Claremont work because he's such an icon to the X-Men community, and he is, but you can still fix past mistakes. Like, it's okay.
There's an unfortunate instance of that in the Roy Thomas run that has never been changed for some reason, in which Cyclops becomes angry at a number of Middle Eastern opponents they are facing and refers to them as a slur that indicates the type of animal they ride. I don't really want to repeat the slur, but for some reason,
wow.
And it's never been edited out. It's never been removed. And unless you're going to go back and you're going to change Cyclops being racist, please don't try to tell me that the importance here was keeping this to prove a point about why Kitty's not racist for pointing out racism. If you can't manage your own house, don't tell me how to manage mine. Yeah. And I would go back and I would grab that mistake in the brilliant, the amazing Roy Thomas run. But, you know, let's not go after people for what they look like.
I was also pretty fascinated to find, because I'm on Marvel Unlimited when I read it, that the original 1982 version not blacked out.
Yes, not
still gets to live right there. Mm-hmm. And I expected, once I pulled this one up and saw the censure, I was like, so you'll fix this one, but you're letting the other one just like live there? Really?
Well, yeah. It's not blacked out in the omnibus either.
No, and the digital version of the extended version is not blacked out either.
So we are facing a number
out in the new single releases that the director's cuts that came out before the hardcover. So it's blacked out in your new hardcover?
It's blacked out in the hardcover and has since been blacked out on the Marvel Unlimited version of the issue. So there's a lot of inconsistency, and you know, it's not hard to do a download patch. I understand you can't go back and you can't fix the original issue, but if they have already done download patches for changing continuity things where, you know, they realize that they said someone's name wrong. If you can patch that, you can patch this. Personally.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise, that kind of makes you no better than the scene that follows. The scene that follows, I'm so glad that we talked about that so extensively. This is actually the third time we've talked about that scene on the course of X's for Podcast. And I really never get tired of talking about why Marvel needs to take a stronger stance on editing that scene. Because in the next scene, it winds up making it almost look silly. We get the actual scene of televised hatred. And you know, there's something that even as a little kid, I remember thinking was mind-blowing, because I read X-Men predominantly through trades initially. And I read Dark Phoenix Saga, and I read Inferno, and I read, you know, the trades, the big crossovers. And as a little kid, I said, reading this, I was like, they're upset watching TV. Oh, that must mean that what they're watching is worse than watching the world end. Like, and that really fucked me up. But as a little kid, I understood on some level. I even saw it as, well, Scott, Storm, and Xavier. Because as a kid, I thought Wolverine was one of the kids because he behaved like a kid. So even though he was an old man, he was one of the kids. Like my dad usually acted like a kid. So like to me, Wolverine was just one of the kids, right? So in my mind, Storm, Scott, and Xavier, all the adults were out. It's like if the Ninja Turtles, if Leonardo, Splinter, and Donatello were out, obviously it's just Casey, Michelangelo, and Raphael. All hell's going to break loose, right?
Yeah.
With all the parents gone, I could really see how they were so broken up by watching this broadcast. But that was a child's eyes, and it happened to imprint on me. How did that feel for you guys? Did you get into that moment of the X-Men being broken by watching something? Or was it like, you know, for people who have literally faced down the Phoenix, they're really reacting to an infomercial?
You know, I liked that. It felt very real and scary to me, because I was raised Catholic, which is like more minor than some of the stuff that's going on today. But I mean, some of these televangelists, I mean, this is as no offense to anybody, they act like salesmen, and their words become powerful, and they kind of intoxicate you, like through these through these big mega churches and the broadcasts and stuff they do. And so, I mean, to think about that, like when you're watching these people talk about why people should hate you, and there's a little tiny part of your mind that's also simultaneously like, wow, he's right. Well, no, he's not. Like it, you know, it messes with you just because of their presence, and they don't seem dangerous, but what they say is dangerous. And that, I don't know, that always messed with me, and still does, especially with everything going on. So to have the X-Men, even the younger X-Men, like watch that and feel that too, I was like, that is so just real, and made this story like hit a lot harder.
And I think part of how the X-Men are so quick to align with Magneto later on, because Magneto is also in that salesman selling pretty junk kind of category where, you know, but think of the power we can have, Charles. And like, you know, he goes right there right away. How did you guys feel about that reaction of the X-Men watching television, such a human thing to do, and having that intense emotional resonance? This scene is referenced all the time.
I agree with Blake. I feel the same way. Like this is one of the scenes in the book that really brought me into the book, because, you know, first we had the intro and then Kate saying that, and I was just like, okay, let me get through this book. Let me get through it. And then we had this scene and I was like, oh, this feels like X-Men book, you know, they're all together. They're all like sharing their thoughts with each other, and it's all, you know, mutant and everything. But it definitely, that's how I feel like it ages well in some ways, in this way, because it's like today, like you can see, you know, attacks on the Capitol, or like people talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter and stuff, and saying that they're like this and that. And it's scary. You watch it on TV or watch it on Twitter or whatever you watch it on, and you're like, this is really happening, and I don't know what's going to happen after this. Like, this is something new and different that hasn't happened before, and I don't know how to react. So it was very, I loved seeing those kind of things in literature like that. Like, you can see like yourself in things like this, and I think that's what the X-Men are all about. Is like, you can see yourself no matter what kind of minority group you're in. You can see
the humanizing factor.
Yeah, the humanizing factor.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw my own friends and I, like, this felt very much like watching a debate on TV, where you're starting to get that feeling that, and I mean, it didn't really resonate with me that like, oh my God, they're so shocked by this when they've watched the end of the world. It was more like the shocking realization that you've been putting your ass on the line for these people who are just so ready to turn against you, and who don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that you're just trying to live, and you could just step back and stop trying to save them, and then where would they be? So that's what I took away from it. That sort of like feeling of, why are we even doing this?
Now, that you know, that moment, that pivotal moment where you see that humanizing factor, I actually really understand why the X-Men do what they do next, which is run a danger room simulation. However, okay, so I love Monsieur Claremont, I do. But this would have been 5 pages at the beginning of a normal issue that was a 3-parter. And, you know, that moment where Xavier and Storm and Cyclops are assassinated sort of rolls right into that danger room sequence. It's this minor moment, you know, kind of between the wasted 2 pages of the danger room sequence and that hit being this like minor moment. I felt in some ways like the Prestige format, this one-shot special edition, slightly out of canon, it kind of made it feel like I knew it wasn't going to matter. It kind of lost some gravitas in that way. Nathan, as someone who's read so much X-Men, right, how does that pacing and that sort of reality, how did the format affect your understanding and reality of the story?
I think the biggest thing that made me really understand what he was trying to do with it is when I read the interview where he was trying to say, if you are going to read, where he wrote it so that if you were going to read one story of X-Men in the next few years around that time, that this one would have everything that you need in it. And yes, Danger Room is a big part of life. It was like Kate Pride going like, hey, you know, it's time for me to just go hit something. That's like so in her character, like how many times has she done it? And it's a part of reaction to what they just watched before, because before they really couldn't, they had no control over it, and that's why they were so scared. Like with the supervillains, they know what they have to do. They know they have to like wham bam fight their way out of everything. But with the societal issues of the Purifiers, they had no idea what to do, and that's why it's like, let's go hit something, yeah. But yeah.
Now, how did you guys feel about that? Did this Danger Room scenario give you guys the eye roll syndrome it gave me, or were you guys like, I got 2 pages of Danger Room, I'm cool with it?
You know, I at first I didn't think about it till I finished everything. And then also going back to what we were talking about the bonus stuff, when they showed Neil Adams's pages, like the 6 pages he did before he quit, that had a Danger Room sequence. That had the weird new beginning with Magneto, and then it transitioned right into this Danger Room element is really important to God Loves Man Kills. It's got to be there for some reason. My only thing is I was wondering if it's a reminder that later on with with Kate in the trunk of the like super advanced mutant catching mobile, if maybe that's why, to remind us of like they train for these weird instances all the time and they can escape things rather conveniently and easily. It's maybe what then later on we're like, oh, that's how Kate got out of the car. This is Danger Room training.
Oh.
So you're saying that indoor trampoline park time translates to street credibility in spy games.
It's so interesting that you connected to that scene, because I connected to final battle at the end. The idea of helping each other with your strengths to get out of things. With having Nightcrawler and Scott and Wolverine coming at Charles at the exact same time with different ways. I think that was the only reason why it would echo for me. And I even think that is a very barely there thread connecting them. So I don't know why it's there.
See,
that's why you're in management.
My connection to it was, I thought he was trying to show, like, obviously that they're training and that they're skilled fighters and all that. Yeah, that's and very X-Men Danger Room want to show that. But my thing was, I thought he was trying to show how dangerous they were, basically, because you just got this like Telegram news special about, we should get away with the mutants. They're abominations. They're dangerous. They're going to destroy us. And then they're like, well, let's go destroy shit in the Danger Room. And then
Kitty's like, turn it up to 11.
Right. And then they have the voiceover of like Stryker or somebody, I can't remember, of like basically talking about how dangerous the mutants are and going after Storm and Charles and Scott while they're in a Danger Room. So they're showing, all their mutant abilities and how dangerous they can be and destructive they can be. So it's like giving you a viewpoint like, hey, this is why they think that, because they have these destructive abilities.
What was up with the scoring, though?
Yeah, the scoring didn't make sense at all.
How did Wolverine?
What is this, 10 of Swords?
Oh, is that what that is?
Has that ever been in a comic before? Like,
I don't remember it.
I don't think so.
How Wolverine got like the highest score, I don't know, but
yeah,
it's in Canadian.
It was locked in a cage the whole time.
I know.
I mean, he's the only one who actually did what he did. He got out without punching his way out. So
true. I mean, yeah. He had to use Nightcrawler though.
I mean, who here hasn't used the X-Men's party bus?
True.
Well, the X-Men's party bus actually is a really sad vehicle to deliver the news through that the X-Men are passed away. Now, I actually love that Kurt gives them the news that the X-Men have died, because it gives him a chance to react, because we get thorough reactions from a number of the other characters, but not Kurt. We get Kate and Illyana, which this is such an underutilization of Illyana, and this would never happen now. She would have a million panels where she's using magic every other fucking panel. There would be demons everywhere. There would be inexplicably Amazing Baby and Jeff the Land Shark in each arm. It wouldn't even be a question. But beyond that, so I think the thing that kind of got my attention here was the X-Men are in such disbelief. They've been so broken. All of their leadership is gone. That's kind of the only reason that Magneto is able to pull off this coup, because it's a coup, basically. He's like, oh, my friend died. I'm going to take his job and his house and his kids. And like, it's a coup.
True.
And
yeah.
I think it's just Mom coming back.
Oh, I love that read. Oh,
That's awful.
And that's them now. That's their love now.
Aww.
And but do you guys, this is a huge change. This is 1981. Magneto is still like a child killer at this point. This is not happy days for Magneto. How do you guys feel about Magneto just being like, hey guys, I'm an X-Man now. What's up? Check the helmet.
Well, I'm used to it, unfortunately. So he's been a good guy for a while, or this isn't the first time I've seen him cross the line and not be a villain. And I think Tori said something like that too. Like we're used to these like newer manifestations of like this new and improved Magneto, and he's in the white suit. He can space travel. And that was the bummer when you told me that this was the first time that Magneto like worked with the X-Men, which, you know, as we know now, will continue to happen more and more down the road. But that was the only bummer of reading this late. Like, I imagine like that hit so hard. Like, oh my, like one of the main villain, this would be like Kingpin and Daredevil teaming up to save an orphanage. Like, when is this gonna happen?
Okay, I need that book. Now, because Tori, now this is an amazing convocation of Daredevil fans. Me, Rod, and Tori are like super hardcore Daredevil stans. Tori has read more Daredevil than almost anybody I've ever met in my life, and it is amazing. So that is the best story I've ever heard pitched in my life, ever. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what makes Magneto's torture sequence later on a little bit easier to believe. Now, I'm glad you mentioned it earlier. I'm sorry, but you know, I grew up watching a lot of American Gladiators. I did. It's why I'm gay now. That and Sears catalogs. So
Yep, there you go.
I very much also loved Ultimate Tag. Everybody needs to watch it. It was so good. But, you know, every now and then there would be this kid and he would be like, I'm 17. Well, I guess they had to be 19 because you couldn't be underage. I'm 19 and I'm from Wisconsin and I weigh 146 pounds and I'm going to run past Gemini and Nitro. And I'm like,
No.
Okay.
how fucking stupid do you think I am? I'm 7. It's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning during the summer. I'm watching USA reruns of American Gladiators, and I know this kid isn't going to fucking pull this off. Are you kidding me? That is how I feel about our sensors indicate that Kitty has gotten into the trunk.
Oh my god.
Gassed her with the
That
trunk
was-
gas.
Yeah.
That was something else. I didn't know what to expect with that. I was like, what is this? This is supposed to be like in the 80s. Why is this car so high tech? What did they expect someone to get into the trunk before?
And like yeah, how did they expect someone to get it in?
Why do they have sensors in the trunk? Has this happened before? Like, I
If
don't.
the Ninja Turtles can build a van in the sewer that can launch pizzas and manhole covers and use that to stop the shredder,
Well,
rich,
see,
scary,
True.
religious people can build a super kidnapping mobile.
but they
Super
eat
kidnapping
pizza.
mobile.
They eat pizza and live in the sewer. That's what they do.
And these people kidnap kids. What do you want?
You know,
They
sure,
detect
yeah,
mutants, okay? So like
That's
that's like
true.
their job. Like
they do kidnap a lot of children. So I mean, I guess yeah, you're right.
And I guess it's partially a hint towards the fact that they built their own Cerebro, that they have technology to find these things, and also to, I guess, knock them out with something that looks like should just murder them.
yeah.
I don't. They use all the comic language and visuals that just says this person's going to be dead at the end of this because the kids were dead,
Yeah.
but now like they're just they're fine.
It's fine.
Like when they shot Ileana, I was like, wait, she doesn't die. What's going
I'm like,
on?
no, she does not time travel her shit out of this. No.
Right? I'm like, I really thought, I was like, Ileana dies? I was like, wait.
I was like, oh
Hold
man, we're
on.
up to 4 now.
I know. I was like, hold on. I'm done with this book.
So too many deaths. Now, someone who comes close to dying but doesn't quite die. Now, this scene echoes a really specific mental image, and if you ever like do any homework on 90s X-Men comics, you're always going to find that panel of Magneto with his hand out, like with the hand, like, and Logan splayed with the adamantium coming out of his body. And there is a phenomenal fucking parallel between that Magneto Logan thing and Magneto torturing the guy.
Yes.
Now, if Storm, Xavier, and Cyclops hadn't been taken off the board, it wouldn't have put Logan in a position to have to take an adult supervisory role. Logan taking a supervisory role leaves the wild card open for Magneto to come in. Logan would have never been permitted in Kitty's eyes or in Xavier's eyes to have committed that level of torture. But the fact that Magneto came in allowed them to raise the stakes and make the X-Men the torturers in this instance. Of course, that does issue the metaphor, are the X-Men no better than their torturers, which is echoed by Kurt. Maybe, this isn't the kindest shit to say, but I kind of understand that they don't have a lot of choices. How do you guys feel? Blake, this is a particularly dark X-Men story, and it was your first time reading it, and you've read so much X-Men. How do you feel about the X-Men being like, nah, torture school, it's what we do?
It was different. I did not expect it, which I think you bring up the excellent point, which is why Wolverine couldn't do it, even though Wolverine was psychologically torturing the one, because he had the 2 claws popped around the guy's head and was waiting, like, you'll get the 3rd one, and then Magneto was like, hold my beer. But I mean, it worked. The art helped because it was like oddly like scary, but the way it's drawn, I feel weird calling a torture scene beautiful. You'll probably never ask me to come back and do a show because I'm saying weird shit now.
I called it the magical race wars story. I think you're fine.
Don't worry, I have so many much worse things to say where I'm just like, yeah, no, this is normal.
I mean, more bigotry elsewhere. It was hysterical.
Yeah, I mean, because it was Magneto, because I mean, there's so much at stake here. And the crazy preacher, or Stryker's campaign, mom, dad, and Jean are gone. Or I guess she's be mom. Sorry, but
Jean's pretty dead right now.
Yeah, Storm. I read the book, guys. I swear.
It's okay. She's barely there. We're having all these conversations about bigotry, and we just sideline the major woman of color in this story.
Yeah.
I mean, she gets like 2 lines.
She does get the cool lightning panel, though. The beautiful when she's worried about Kitty.
Yeah.
But the person who gets to electrocute someone back to life panel is Magneto, because I forget all the time that attracting and repelling things is explicitly the power of lightning.
I did mean to ask you that. I was like, oh, can he do that?
Well, I liked when you were like, is anybody going to point out ferrous metals? Is anybody going to call out the fact that there are only 3 naturally occurring ferrous metals? All the other metals that exist in the world, not magnetic. My arm is so white. So I look like I have powers right now.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the master of magnetism. And I'm like, I mean, you could go for master of metalry. That's also
yeah, there you go.
And he just starts to make everybody Etsy jewelry.
Oh my god.
So how did you guys feel about Magneto's sudden role within the X-Men and his role as, the X-Men's very own torturer?
So him being a torturer fits. He's done it. I mean, he does it after this, so it's like we've seen it, but this is the first time. So okay, first time seeing it. Oh, shocking, sure. But it's expected because he did kill children before. But also. The X-Men being okay with this, I think, is fine, because Magneto already said that these people that were here, he found that they killed 2 mutant children. X-Men already think that they killed Storm, Cyclops, and Xavier. So it's like they're like they're killers. They don't deserve, they're not going to kill them, but like they don't deserve to, not be tortured if they need to get information and try to find the people responsible for killing their friends, bringing them justice. Like, it is understandable.
Rod, you can be on my quiet council anytime.
I agree. I'm very shocked that people afterwards were like, does that not make us worse as them? And I'm like, you're in a war. This is what you do.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, have you tortured before? No. Is it unusual to torture someone in front of a 15-year-old? Yes.
Yeah.
But like, times is hard. People are dead. You gotta go.
Right now, you gotta fight to live and live to fight. That's all you got right now.
Exactly.
So, like,
exactly.
So she's 15. Why are all these purifiers? Why are they like in their underwear underneath these robot suits? Like how many of them do we see in like their underwear? Like 3 of them? Like
it gets hot under there. Have you seen people? Have you seen furries? All they do is wear underwear under their suits. It gets hot.
But wouldn't it be like metal rubbing up against like everywhere?
When I worked in Disney World and I would wear my pack costume, I wore like a 3-piece fucking suit, basically. I swear to God, there were times where, like, even though that was all like sport wick, I would be like, Kevin, peel this off of me. I was like soft wrapped in a sweater. It was just the end of time.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Also, I'm really glad you told me that there is a image very similar to this torture scene with Wolverine, because I could not figure out what these little spindly things coming out of his hand are. It's very strange.
It's, you know, it's about the art of the panel, I think, more than it is about executing
realistic stripping of an armor.
I've worked there. I don't think they had a draftsman on hand, but I couldn't get there. So, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for coming out to talk about the first issue of God Loves Man Kills, the extended edition. And guys, I can't wait to come back and talk about the second issue. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much.
Bye.